Welcome, bet riders around the world. My name is Gary Solomon, and you're watching the Laidback Bike Report. Well, guys, it is so great to have you with us today. Let me tell you what's on today's webcast. We are going to open up, as we always do, with our pal Honza Galla from the Czech Republic. He is going to give us our news report. And we have a very special addition to the news today. We're going to have Doug Davis with a special report on Bentrider Online. I think you're going to want to hear. We're going to bring that up to date. We have some wonderful guests with us today, including Mark Harris, who's going to talk to us about some wind-powered recumbents. We have BJ Strass, who is with us, and he is going to talk about fixing your old recumbent seats. Dr. Craig Cornelius is back with us with an interesting talk about the bent packaging problem, as he terms it. And Bicycle Man himself, Peter Stull, will be with us. He's got a really nice little video about his interaction with a young man who had some balancing issues, and he helped him with a folding trike, putting that together and getting it into their vehicle. I think you'll enjoy that as well. And bringing up the caboose end of the show, it'll be our pal Denny Voorhees, our sports director, with the sports report. So let's meet our crew today. First of all, we have in Kentucky, we have Larry Varney, the bearded one himself. Larry, how you doing today, pal?
Pretty good. It's a nice sunny but cold day in northern Kentucky. It's 24 degrees out there right now, a low of 14 coming tonight, but it's Super Bowl Sunday, so it's okay.
Yes, big Bengals fan is Larry, and we wish you all the best. Being a Browns fan, I could really care less. Let's move along to Nina Paley. Speaking of caring less about sports, I'm guessing. Nina, how are you doing? It's great to have you back.
I'm good. It's snowing here and it's colder here in central Illinois.
Central Illinois. Well, good. Great to have you with us. And a place that's a little bit warmer down in Florida is that sports director, Denny Voorhees. Denny, how are you doing?
Swell. 70 degrees. Gorgeous. Got a ride in already. So, and Buffalo's not playing, so who cares?
Right. Moving along down to Dallas, Big D. It's Double D, Doug Davis. Doug, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Wait a minute. I thought I turned the Super Bowl on. What's this?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay.
We're sneaking it in before the Super Bowl today.
Who day?
It was snowing here yesterday when I rode in from there, and now it's 80 degrees. So,
all right.
Welcome to Texas weather.
That's how it goes there. And in the Czech Republic, there he is. It's Honza Galla. Hi, Honza.
Hi, great to be here with you.
It is great to have you with us. We look forward to your report. All right, guys. So let me tell you, first of all, about our live chat. If you guys have watched us before, you know that we really appreciate all your thoughts, comments, questions on our live chat on YouTube and Facebook. So please join in that today. If you can, ask your questions of our guests if you want, or you can talk amongst yourselves in the Bent community there. And let us know where you are watching from. That's always interesting to see as well. So that's good. And listen, you could support the Laidback Bike Report if you like what you see every month. And how can you do that? Well, you can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that little bell so you get notifications when we do go live. And you can click the little white eye that might appear up there, and that will take you right to the laidbackbikereport.com website, where you can find lots of information about our past shows, see what's coming up, buy a hat if you want to support us in that way. That would be great too. And it'll tell you a little bit more about becoming a Patreon sponsor, which is something we love. You can see all of our sponsors here that we have on the screen. For as little as $1 a month, you can support us, and we love our Patreons. We also love our industry sponsors. Let me tell you about them right now. First, there is TerraCycle, makers of exquisite recumbent parts and accessories for your bent, and Trailside Trikes, a fine recumbent trike shop on the Withlacoochee Trail in Florida and now in Knoxville, Tennessee as well. And TerraTrike Green Speed, the best in leisure, performance, adventure, touring, electric, and portability. Wherever your adventure leads, TerraTrike will take you there, and Green Speed, where Ian Sims designs bring performance through science and engineering. And Laidback Cycles, the top USA dealer for TerraTrike and the premier source for Catrike, Ice, and Green Speed. We give you the freedom to ride. And Connecticut Yankee Peddler. We feature multiple brands of trikes, including electric assist models. Test rides and Southern Iowa hospitality are always available at our mega store in Chariton. And Avenue Trikes, with the gearing you need and the comfort you want, in stock and ready to ship so that you can enjoy riding again. Dealer inquiries are welcome. And Azub, proud to be a partner of the Laidback Bike Report. Our entire crew hopes you have a great 2022 with many miles spent in your recumbent seats. Enjoy the show. And Recumbent PDX. With 150 trike inventory, Recumbent PDX is the West Coast's only cat trike megastore. We have over 20 trikes on our showroom floor just waiting for you to test ride through our beautiful Portland neighborhood. Call or email to schedule your test ride today. All right, guys, let's move on with the show and let's kick it off with our pal Honza Galla, who has this news report.
Hello, everyone. Honza Galla from Recumbent.news here once again, this time with news items from January. There are two major of them. The first one is sad. Hardy Siebeke, a man behind the Spezialradmesse known as Spezi Show, has announced that the show won't be organized this year again. It's the third time he has to cancel it due to the corona issues. And it's a big loss for the European and worldwide recumbent community because at the Spezi Show, manufacturers were used to announce their new products, their new bikes, trikes, velomobiles, and we will have it again either online or won't have it at all. The second news is way better. Velomobile NL announced that they are working on Snook L, a very fast velomobile. The Snook was for riders up to 182 centimeters, and they have announced that they are working on a version for taller riders, a bit longer, wider, higher velomobile. So it's a great news for those interested in. And I would also like to mention that I'm right now publishing a series of articles which I call 2021 in review. It's a series of short interviews with owners of recumbent companies. They answer my question about 2021, the issues they had, the increase in sales, if there was any, so how high it was, and what they think about the 2022 season. So there have been 2 articles published already, and a few more are in the pipeline. So stay tuned. Watch for announcement from Recumbent.news and you will definitely get some interesting information from this series. And this is all from me for now. I'm with my kids in the mountains because they have some free time in the school, and I love this place, this snowy Beskid Mountains in the Czech Republic. So have a great time. Bye.
See, now that's a weather report. Did you see the beautiful scenery behind Honza there? So everybody else is just talking about how cold or how warm it is. That's beautiful, Honza. Thanks for that great report. Any updates? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in the office already. So the snowy mountains are gone, and here is no snow, and quite spring weather.
You were just as jealous watching yourself in the mountains as we were watching the mountains. So, well, great. We appreciate that news report. Now we're going to have a little addition to the news, Honza. You can stay with us if you like. This is big news, folks. Really, has there been much more chatter about much of anything in the recumbent world over the last couple of months than what the issues were that had befell Bentrider Online? And we talked briefly with Larry on and off, and we all know that there's been horrible issues with that, and it's really not been usable for the most part for the last couple of months. But we have an update, and it's with Doug Davis, who has a lot to say about what the latest is on Bentrider Online. So, Doug, tell us what you know. What's going on with Bentrider?
So where it is Brian and I work together to get it up and running. It's back where it should be, we think. It's kind of one of those things when these systems start having the issues, you never know you got all the issues resolved until you trip over them. But I think that where we're at right now is the forum should be back and running like it used to. I've put some mitigation software in place to solve some of the issues it was dealing with. I need another couple of 3 days of time to forensically go through everything and really do a good report on what happened and why it was in the state it was in, and get that out to everybody. And then Brian and I will have put together a get well plan to migrate it off of the platform it's on, which is a really old hosting site, and onto something modern, and update the update the software. I'm not sure whether it'll stay on the vBulletin system or it will migrate to something more modern at this point. We've been kind of kicking around lots of ideas. But that all should come out next week. Toward the end of the week, we'll have a working plan and then let everybody know and let them know what they need to do, if anything.
All right, Doug. So I guess my question is, will the archive that is on Bentrider now, all the years of information, is that still there? Can we still access it? And so and going forward, we'll be looking forward to being able to continue to access
and I have pulled an offline copy. So even if the site completely goes away tomorrow, I've got an offline copy sitting right here, so I can put it back somewhere.
Well, that's just amazing, Doug. We'll delve deeper into this and continue to update our viewers on all this. But really, on behalf of the recumbent community, thank you so much for jumping in there. Yeah, you are amazing. So we really appreciate that, Doug. Thanks. And guys, I was on Bentrider this morning. I was able to post the promos for this show and everything. It seems to be working great. So great. Thanks, Doug. And at that point, at this point, I guess, let's move along to our first major segment. So this is with a gentleman who contacted me a few months ago about something very interesting that he does. Is a little departure for us. It is recumbent. It is laid back. It is not human powered, though. It's powered by the wind. So we're going to learn a little bit about Landsailers right now with Mark Harris. Well, here we are with Mark Harris. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm fine.
Great. All right, we're going to talk about Landsailers today, a little departure for us. But I was wondering if we could kick it off by having you tell our audience a little bit about your recumbent history.
Sure. My recumbent history started in 1991. I bought a Trek R200 short wheelbase recumbent from a dealer who was a friend of mine who was a catamaran racing friend. As I remember, the $1,600 price was reduced down to $600 due to low sales, and so I was able to get it. The truck R200 was only made as a recumbent by Trek for a couple of years because the employee that was responsible for the development passed away. In later years, I worked at a Kiwanis bike project in Reno, wrenching on donated bikes and Burning Man bikes. I was able to buy a donated bikey, and I restored it, and I use it at landsailing events. And I have a little folding basket on the back that is handy. Since then, with my wife and I, she rides a Cat Trike Villager, and I have a Greenspeed Arrow. And then in the photograph, there's a little trailer, and that's for carrying a kayak behind an e-bike or a bicycle.
What exactly is a landsailer?
Basically, a landsailer is a three-wheel device. It has a sail on a mast, or it can have a solid wing with or without a flap. It's mounted on a frame with either a solid body or open. It's typically steered with your feet. Push left, push right, go right. There are two classes of boats, one called a blow cart, the other a DN ice boat converted for land sailing, and those both have hand steering with a tiller. Some of the fastest land sailors are 20 to 30 feet long and 16 to 18 feet wide. A lot of these larger boats that are modified ice boat chassis from the Midwest and Eastern U.S., or they're actually homemade by a lot of pilots.
So, Mark, there's been a long history of land sailors that we are pretty much ignorant of, but I know you know a lot about. Can you give us a little thumbnail history of land sailing in the past?
Sure. I'm referring to a book that was put out by Don Rapinski, who started land sailing in this country. Basically, about 1800 BC, a pharaoh had a sailing chariot in Egypt. In the 1100s, Russians had a longboat with wheels that they made into a sailing war vehicle. And then the Chinese in the 1500s. And then about 1600s, some commercial and later recreational and racing land sailors were built in Belgium and Holland, one of which was a 28-seat bus that carried people between two towns. From that, there was a sail-powered train in the 1830s in the United States before steam engines became readily available, and they tried that. A Conestoga wagon in 1853 with a square sail. And then from then on, about 1850 to 1900, they started using what you could consider a triangular sail with three wheels typically. Some had four. And I'll explain why that's not a good idea. In about 1907 was about the first time that someone tried to make a vehicle to sail across the dry lake, El Mirage Dry Lake in Southern California. About the turn of the century, they started racing. Then in this country, the first real land sailor was built by Don Rapinski in 1963. In 67, there was a National Geographic Trans-Sierra land sailing event where they went 1,500 miles across Algeria and Morocco. And then about 1972, the North American Landsailing Association formed. And from that time forward, there were either national or international races held for land sailing at a place called Ivanpah Dry Lake down at Primm, Nevada. In 1974, the NALSA, the North American Landsailing Association, held its first international championship at Roach Dry Lake. That's actually in Nevada. Then there's the casinos, and then across the state line is where most of Ivanpah Dry Lake is, which is in California. Starting in 75, 76, NALSA had its second and third championship. And then about 1998, a couple of the pilots here went to the 100th FISLI championship in Belgium. FISLI stands for basically a Federation International of Sand Yachting Land Sailing Yachts. Long title. 2014, the NALSA hosted the Fisley International Championship at a more remote place, Smith Creek in central Nevada. We had 15 countries participating, 165 pilots. And because of COVID, it's been postponed to 2023. Fisley will have the next international championship at Barriel, Argentina, which is a dry lake, not a beach, and it's located near the border of Chile and Argentina.
All right, Mark, that's an interesting history. Now, the modern Landsailers apparently have evolved from what, ice boats? Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yes, the DN, which stands for Detroit News, is a very popular ice boat class that was designed early in the 1900s, and a lot of its design attributes work out for a Landsailor. In fact, a lot of these ice boats can be converted by removing the blades and putting wheels on. This photo is of a Skeeter class, a very fast, largest ice boat that races. And it's a little different in that the cockpit of it is in front of the mast.
All right, so let's take a look at now how these ice boat designs kind of turn into the land sailing designs, starting with some commercially manufactured ones.
Yes, starting in the early 1970s, there were some small manufactured yachts built down in Southern California. And in Northern California, about that same time period, was a man named Alan Demon started manufacturing the Manta class. This is an example of a Manta twin. It can carry two people. One person is for racing, and it's been referred to as the fastest lawn furniture on the planet. It's all made out of aluminum tubing. The manufacturer was earlier a hang glider manufacturer. This is an example of a manufactured very fast boat called the XLR, made by Seagull in France. It's an enclosed body with a very efficient sail. You notice the sails are very flat because of the speed of the wind going across it, the apparent wind. This is an example of a Class 3 boat. These are manufactured typically in Europe, but there are people that make their own there, and we've had some that have been successfully copied here. But oftentimes these boats are imported for a major event in this country, and then they stay and they get sold to someone, and they live on the dry lakes here. This is a blow cart. It's manufactured in New Zealand. Currently, it's the only manufactured yacht being made and sold in the United States currently. It's a mini yacht. It has the little panels that can be added to the side, and it has hand steering. And in this boat, you race according to your weight. So they have 3 or 4 different weight classes of pilots. These are examples of boats that were brought over, were manufactured here. The yellow boat in the foreground and the green one are Fed 5s. Those are made for a while by S&R Marine. The one on the left with the red sail is a Standard. That's a one design type of boat, and that's manufactured by Seagull in France and a couple of other licensed builders. The ones on the right are called mini Skeeters. Those are all homemade kit boats that are very fast, made out of wood. This goes what happens if you don't let your sail out or a gust hits you, especially in a boat like this blow cart. It's not very wide, and you can see how the rear wheel is sort of digging in, but he's past probably the point of no return and is going to capsize. He's strapped in, so he's not going to go anywhere. But however, on beaches, they do not wear seat belts because if they go in the ocean, they want to be able to get out in a hurry. As far as safety concerns, no one's ever been killed in this country land sailing, and I think in Europe it's about the same. So it's a safe sport from that standpoint. You're wearing a crash helmet, eye protection. You're strapped in typically with a seatbelt or a harness. And in the case of a capsize, all these boats either have a mast or a structure to hold it up sideways, or in the case of bigger boats that have guy wires to hold the mast or wing up, they have a roll bar in back. And so basically they're much more stable than a water boat, and we've had a good safety record. We also make sure that when these boats are out racing, that the race courses are clear and all spectators are kept back behind a safe distance.
All right, let's jump back at that group here that we talked about a minute ago. And can you tell us a little bit about the costs involved with getting into land sailing? What do these vehicles cost?
Sure. As far as cost, used boats you can find for a few $100s, $1,000. Newer boats, you're going to be paying more like $3,000 and up. Some of these boats, people invest quite a bit of money on a big boat to where they may have $20,000 invested. So it's all in what you want to have. Basically, land sailing is the cheapest form of sailing on the planet and the fastest.
All right, Mark. So now we've discussed the commercial vehicles that are available. How about the customer home-built world of land sailors? What do we have there?
In the custom home-built land sailors, they can be made out of lots of different materials. This is a design that was probably built in the 60s. You notice it's got two front wheels, one back wheel, a lot of draft and an old sail. Not real fast, but you can carry things around and move. For a homemade, home-built boat, there are a couple of different ways to go. There's boats that have class rules that you build to, and then you have it measured. But by and large, most of these are homemade based on fitting into a class. In the case of NALSA, North American Landsailing Association, we have what are called a box rule, and it can be based on just the sail area. It can be based also on taking a piece of rope, going around all three wheels and what that measures, and sometimes the overall height of the mast. And so in this case, this is an example of a class 3 boat. You can go up to about 76 square feet. You notice that wing has got a front section and a back section. The back is a flap, and that's how you can get camber and power out of a solid wing. This is an example of a International Mini 5.6, and a lot of them were fiberglass and composites. This particular boat was built by the same guy in the previous slide, John Eisenlohr, but he used a very, very thin 80 thousandths aluminum over a chrome moly steel frame. And then he's limited in this class to about a 5.5 square meter sail. This is a homemade design that came out one year. It's got 4 wheels, and so it's not very stable. It also, if you notice, it has a rather large, what's referred to as a low aspect sail. So it'll go in light winds, but you won't be able to control it very well as it gets windier. And you notice the sheeting arrangement is a little difficult because of the way it's rigged. There's no boom really to pull the back part of the sail, the clew in. This is an example of a mini skeeter, but modified for a solid wing. And so it has a pivot, and it has basically inside there's no sheeting with block and tackle. There's just a wheel with a chain, sprockets, and then a little lever that latches over to move the flap to give it more or less power. This is an example of unlimited boat. There's really no rules for these as far as sail area, anything like that, but they're designed to go in one direction as fast as they can. This particular boat is called the Iron Duck. It was very heavy. To balance it, it had some weights in the back of it. And in 1999, Bob Shoemaker and Bob Dill went out and broke the record at the time, and they took it up to 116.7 miles an hour. You notice how the boat is not straight, and the front wheel is pitched way over to one side. And that's because it really only goes fast in one direction. And then you've got to go back and do it again. And this was the day that the Iron Duck hit his record of 116 miles an hour at Ivanpah Dry Lake. This is the current record holder, 126.2 miles an hour. Richard Jenkins holds that record. It took him 10 years of a couple of different boats to have something like this built by a company in Thailand out of carbon fiber. And he doesn't like a flap, but he likes having a little rear flap in the back. And he was able to go in a 35 mile an hour wind and the right angle. He hit 126.2, and that set the current world record. This is an example of homemade by Phil Rothrock in Oregon. His father was a builder and designer. They built several of these solid wing landsailers. You notice that this particular one has wheel pants over the wheel. Because of the lower speeds that we're dealing with here, it makes a big difference aerodynamically if you cover the wheels. And so you can get a reduction of drag by about 15% by having a cover like that over pretty much a flat, if you looked at straight on, a squarish kind of tire. This is a example. Phil tried something different, a smaller boat for a class 4, and basically he put the pilot in front of the wing. There are a couple of good things about that. It puts more weight on the front wheel for steering, making big turns, but it's more difficult to know where you're trimming. You typically have a mirror, something that you can see behind you to see where the wing is. This is an example of a Skeeter class from in the past as an ice boat, and the owner, Chauncey Griggs from Wisconsin, built this as a solid wing. He was easily able to beat every other Skeeter on the ice to the point where they banned a solid wing rig because he would always win. As a landsailor, this boat was pretty fast. It weighs something because it's made out of fiberglass, not carbon fiber. And you can imagine turning this thing. It has a rather large turning radius because of the wheelbase. This is a homemade from Cedarville, California, Ben Gooch, and he built several of these. One time he built one that had a 40-foot high wing, very narrow, and it lasted a whole week, so that was interesting. In this slide, there's an example of a couple of other solid wing landsailers. Again, one is by Ben Gooch from Cedarville, California, and you can see that some have very tapered wings, no flap, and others can have, they've tried more power, but more sail area, but it's much lower and has a much larger flap, the part in the back that moves. This was a design that Mike Brown, a retired Coast Guardsman, made. It's for comfort. I tried sailing it once. It's not easy, and it's different in that it has a tadpole with 2 front wheels and 1 in back. But he had a little window he added in the wing so you could look ahead to see where you were going. So that helped a little bit when the wing was hard over. This is an example of a homemade by Norton Broden called Legend, and it's all Kevlar fiberglass construction. He built that in the late 80s, early 90s. And for many years, it was the fastest boat around the course until some of the solid wing boats could go faster. This is a boat that I like because it's very efficient. In a 10-mile-an-hour wind, this boat could easily get up past 50 miles an hour downwind. It's light. It has kind of a gull wing rear axle, streamlining. And then if it got windier, the pilot would just take off that wing mast and put a smaller one on. And then he had streamlining to the point where even his helmet was blended into the body. This is a homemade that was made by Ken Hatch. He liked to make wooden kayaks, and so this is all wooden strip, epoxy molded, and he built a wing mast on it. Then he wanted a pretty sophisticated sheeting mechanism, so he's got a traveler that goes out and back, and you can see the back part of the sail works as a flap, and then there's usually a little line that you can see forward of that, and that's a rotation limiter. So you can rotate that wing, and it's amazing when you get the wing in the right position for the wind you have, apparent wind, how fast the acceleration is. Again, this is a mini Skeeter. It's a kit boat by John Eisenlohr. He gives you plans, and then he does seminars to help build these. Basically, plywood construction glued together. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 purchase a main sheet, because in land sailing with a soft sail, you've really got to keep your sail flat for going upwind, and you never let the sail out much. And so that's why you need all that purchase to be able to mechanically pull it in.
All right. That's great. Now, I think at this point, we are going to start talking about how you, in particular, got into land sailing and your personal story with it, Mark. So why don't you tell us about the beginnings of your land sailing?
Okay, my sailing experience started in 1968, crewing and racing in small dinghies. I then progressed to faster catamarans and inland lakes in the Pacific Ocean. In one regatta, I was in Monterey. I got to reach out while I was crewing and touch the fin of a thresher shark as we startled it in the water. This is an example of a NACRA 5.5 Uni. It's a one-person boat. I trapeze most of the time upwind. You notice that it has what's referred to as a deck sweeper sail that goes all the way down to the trampoline. But there's a little spot in the back where you can crawl through to switch sides when you tack. This is an example of what not to do. Practicing for a national race, a friend of mine went out and was hit by a thunderstorm and came in upside down and had to be warmed up by the Coast Guard and the ambulance. We got to recover his boat, and that was me in the water with the boat. At one time, in working for the state of Nevada Public Utility Commission, they wanted the authors wanted of Nevada Magazine wanted an article on land sailing, so I gave them a picture taken from the 2002 World Championship, and it published in as Nevada's Playa Playgrounds. This is a picture of a boat I used to have, a Fed 5. It was made by S&R Marine, and it's in this country. And that sail was pretty small. It was like 3.5 square meters. And so we had a race that was very windy, almost to the maximum we allow, which is 2 gusts of 30 miles an hour or so. So I started the race, and I was the only one with a small sail that I could control. It took me 5 minutes to do a lap of the race, and then they finished the race. I said, okay, it's too dangerous. You guys come in. And so I finished that race in a hurry. This shows how land sailors over time, depending on how big the boat is, the smaller ones especially, the rotational speed, the drag of their tires is much less if you go with a bigger and bigger diameter. You can see that this is like an extreme. I have a 10-inch tire in front, an 18-inch tire from a motorcycle on the rear, and now I use a 24-inch spun aluminum wheel with a 26-inch bicycle tire.
What about your early land sailing itself? So how did you get into it? What years did you get into it, and what was that like?
In the early 1980s, I had a chance to try sailing a Manta single on a concrete foundation of a building under construction in Reno. That was interesting, but there was no organized land sailing in that area at the time, only in Southern California. In 1990, I went down to the that year's Fisley World Championship at Ivanpah Dry Lake, and I got to sail a Manta single during that time. And from then on, I got involved in land sailing. The next year, in 91, I had a boat like this, which I still have, the Amanda Twin, and I started racing. Since then, I've won 9 times in national competition in 2 different classes. I've also gone as fast as 94 miles an hour in somebody else's solid wing boat.
That is amazing. All right. You mentioned earlier about this national association, the NALSA, that you called it, North American Landsailing Association. Can you give us a brief history of that?
Yes. Basically, NALSA was formed by one individual in Southern California in 1974, Don Rapinski. And he got interested in land sailing. He built a boat. He then raced in Europe and found out that they had much faster boats. And then coming back here, he started the NALSA, North American Landsailing Association. It's made up of several clubs. And basically, we have some regional events that clubs put on, but basically once a year, the America's Land Sailing Cup at Ivanpah Dry Lake, about 40 miles south of Las Vegas. And that's where this particular event's held all week long, the last full week of March.
Mark, tell us a little bit about the nature of this racing. What are some of the rules and regulations about starts and finishes and that sort of thing?
Sure. Basically, years ago, we had very complicated courses that you'd have to look at a course chart taped on some tubing. It was very difficult to understand what the course was. About the last 15 years, we've basically, it's a timed race, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And basically, you, depending on the boat, you're either strapped in and waiting on the line to go, or some of the classes you can run, jump, and get in. And basically, you race for 15, 20 minutes. You do laps until you see a checkered flag, and they finish you. And then based on order of finish. You can see here that some of the boats get a push. The bigger boats, you can run, jump, and get in. Or you can have a pusher, but the pusher must stop at that rope on the ground, which is the start line.
Is there such a thing as sponsorship in these races?
Yes. Over the years, there have been some sponsors of people who own a business or whatever, but by and large, not that much sponsorship in the United States. However, in Europe, there's lots of sponsorship. To give you an example, there's maybe 700-800 land sailors in this country. There are 3,000 licensed pilots just in the country of France. And so it's a much larger activity on the beaches in Europe.
There have been all these competitions you've discussed. What kind of speeds are we talking about? What are some of the records, maybe the history of the records as you know them?
Sure. Speed records, basically, well, you have to understand we didn't necessarily have GPSs at the time and the different ways of using a radar gun. But the 59.9 miles an hour was recorded by Norden Broden in the early 70s in a Mana single. 64 miles an hour on a special made boat that was sponsored called Archwing. Then that was in 74. In 2019, Alan Wertinen went 74 miles an hour in that Yellow Fever boat. Then a Friendship, which was that large boat that was designed and built by Norden Broden, went 88 miles an hour in Southern California in 76. In 1991, Bertrand Lambert of France went 94.1 miles an hour. And I was a crew with Clarence Rothrock on the Black Rock that same year in his solid wing boat, Scorpion. And we hit 94 miles an hour unofficially. And to do that, we were using bike speedometers with extra magnets. We could figure out the rotational speed matching what the speed of the vehicle was. In 1999, Bob Dill and Bob Schumacher got up to 116.7 miles an hour on the Iron Duck. And their earlier record was a few years before, 108 miles an hour. And then in 2009, after 10 years of trying and a couple of different boats, Richard Green got Greenbird up to 126.2 miles an hour. And that was in a 35 mile an hour wind. He couldn't quite get the top speed he wanted. He went into Las Vegas, bought some aluminum strips, came back and attached them to the back of his his wing, much like a glider, with positive flap instead of a negative flap, and that gave him an extra amount of power to hit 126.2.
And so that record, 126.2, does that stand today?
Yes, it does.
So it's been 10 years more. I mean, if you consider not racing a couple of years, tell me why no one's.
Well, it's a very difficult record, and one that you've got to have a hard surface. A beach, you just don't have the distance or the right conditions for that. But on a dry lake, you can. But you've got to have the right conditions as wind, and then also the landsailor has got to be able to hold that wind and be able to use every bit of the gust that you get. It's quite often, how long does a gust last? But because of GPS, as long as we've got like 3 of them that are certified and verified, that satisfies the Guinness Book of World Records.
Very nice. All right, let's focus in on the Landsailers that you have had and the history of those. Talk a little bit about what you have put together as far as a fleet of Landsailers in your history.
Okay, I've sailed lots of other people's boats, but the ones I've personally sailed and raced in have been Manta Single, a Manta Twin, a Fed 5, and a Promo Class 5 from Europe that came over here and was sold by a dealer for a while. And then this boat has been modified. Instead of straight axle, you notice it's got bent axles with the wheels cambered in and much larger diameter, 24-inch wheel with a 26-inch tire. And this boat is pretty fast. But you notice that I'm laying down. I have a little GPS I can kind of look at up in front. You notice that there's an apparent wind indicator, a little airplane out in front to give me some indication of the wind. And I can explain why that's always looking forward. And you see those little weights that are in the front? With my body weight in the back of the boat, there's not that much contact weight on the front wheel. So that weight up front gives me the amount of steering I need when you make a turn. You want that front wheel to bite on something and help turn you when you tack or jibe.
Okay. Now, how about the competitions? You mentioned briefly before about some of the records. Can you briefly go through those again? What have been your competitions and how have you done?
Right. I've been competing basically since 91, and I've won, like I said, 9 times at the America's Landsailing Cup. Actually 8 times, and then 1 time the Manta Nationals. But I've been in different boats. But in those 2 classes, pretty much.
All right, great. Now, Mark, when you first contacted me so we could start talking about this interesting subject of Landsailers, you mentioned one of our esteemed viewers, Mark Millam, who is apparently getting into landsailing and asked some of your advice. Tell me a little bit about your interaction with Mark. What is he up to as far as you know right now?
Yeah, Mark reached out to me from Louisiana, and he, many years ago, they first were being made, I think in 77, but he has an older Manta Twin, and he was considering coming out to the America's Landsailing Cup Regatta in March. And so he wanted to tune his boat up, possibly get a new sail, and what other little speed tips that I could give him. So I gave him quite a bit of information, helped him find sources, wheel bearings and tires and things like that, also a sail. And he intends to come out and race with us in March, whether or not we have the regatta or not, to go landsailing. I'm not sure where he sails in Louisiana, but I know that there are some people in the country that have been going to abandoned airports and other open areas.
All right. Well, Mark, we wish you luck. Hopefully you're watching the show today. That's an awesome looking Morsiglio carbon trike that you see Mark on there. So yeah, good luck to Mark. And that was nice of you to contribute to his desire to get into this, Mark. All right, let's talk about another of your activities. I know that you and your wife show dogs and love your animals. I was wondering, do they ever participate with you on the Landsailers?
Yeah, basically, my wife's been a longtime breeder and raiser trainer of bearded collies, and so with a Landsailer, our dogs just think of it as a car without doors, and so they'll hop on the boat. In this case, Cash, the bearded collie, at a dry lake in northern Nevada, wanted to go sailing.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's finish up by helping our viewers find out more information, Mark, about land sailing. Where can they go to learn more about land sailing?
References for land sailing you can find on the internet search. You can go to www.nalsa.org. There are many links there, a lot of information on current and past. There's also a link to the man that formed NALSA, Don Rapinski. He wrote a book that's very detailed, Land Sailing, the Passionate Sport of Sailing on Land. You can get that to Amazon, I believe. And so he's got a very detailed of what he did and the history. A lot of the information I gave you came from his book.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Mark, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you working with me on this particular segment. Really interesting stuff, a little departure, as I said, for us in the Laidback Bike Report. So not human powered, but it's a nice segue into something that is very laid back and very fast. And we appreciate you sharing your experiences with our audience.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. There is Mark. Mark is not at home, and he's, I think, in a hotel somewhere, so you might hear a little background noise. But, Mark, we thank you so much for contacting me and sharing all this information about Landsailers. And let's get into a couple of questions, if we could. I first have had a few questions around the actual physics of using a sail that I'm sure pertain to both sailboats and Landsailers, and not everyone's real clear about this. So could you quickly explain what it is a sail does? Because I think a lot of people have the idea like the wind is filling up the sail and just blowing it. And then if that's the case, then how can you turn around and come back, right? But that's not really how sails work, is it?
Rather than using Reynolds numbers and airflow and a lot of other complicated things that even I don't know about, just imagine an airplane wing with a curve on top, flat below. That difference in flow of molecules provides what's called lift. In other words, the pressure is less on top where it's curved because the molecules go farther, and less underneath because it's straight. Same thing with a wing or a sail. You're forcing the wind to go around the back side of it. That creates lift, which means that it will start pulling you in that direction. The wheels resist that, and then as you go forward and get the apparent wind forward, it follows that more and more. And so you don't need much camber, but you need some initially to get going. And then basically you're getting pulled along. The wheels are resisting. When you have the right perfect angles, which is about 120 degrees behind you, in other words, not dead behind, but at an angle, then all those vectors, all those forces are going in the same direction. And that's how you can achieve the high speeds.
And yeah, so I was going to say, so I mean, the big question then is like, how can you go faster than the wind? And that is how, because there are forces that add up to more than just what the wind is blowing, right?
And because the lift is so big, the drag is so small, it takes a while until you're up to the point where those forces are equal.
Very good. All right. Our guest coming up next actually had a question for you. These are very similar to the types of structures that you would put together for an ultralight, a plane kind of thing. And so BJ Strass is asking if if Rand's ever got involved with any land sailors.
I have a Rand seat.
Right.
No,
and of course, he asked because Rand, as most
right.
of us know, did get involved with ultralight
Right.
planes, but not that you know of.
Alan Demon had a very good business building hang gliders. And then when probably he lost a few customers, who knows, but he decided that he needed to expand his operation out of Alameda, California. And so he he developed a little Landsailor frame using a lot of components from a hang glider, brought it out to Nevada and tried it on some dry lakes out where we are, and that worked. Then he had a friend try it on the mud flats that existed at the time on the island of Alameda in San Francisco Bay Area. And from that, he developed the Manta Landsailers.
Okay. Trey, can you bring Nina up? Nina has a question for you. Nina, go ahead.
Yeah. So I've thought about sailing here in central Illinois because we have lots of wind and it's very flat, but we don't have salt flats. After looking at these land boats, I realized this is much too fast and scary for me. And what I really want is, I think, a sail trike. Is there any overlap between land sailors and sail trikes?
Yeah, basically, first off, there are some people that sail in Illinois and some other states. They have a heavier framed Sirocco Landsailor that was made for a few years, and it even has shock absorbers and wider tires. So you could go on a hard field surface, but otherwise a parking lot or something like that. That's why blow carts are useful in that regard. The one thing to remember, if you're on a hard surface like pavement, you can really build up a lot of speed, and sometimes you run out of parking lots. So you have to pay attention to how fast you're going and how fast you can turn. As far as trikes are concerned, Gary may have a photograph of the Arc and Roll, and that was a gentleman in France who brought it over here, got me to be on national television, and we actually got on in San Francisco in a parking lot, and they even took it out across the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was a vertical sail, only about 1 square meter, but you could fold the sail down to half a square meter, and it mounted on a triangular bike frame with the sail out in front of you. And then it had a shock cord to the front axle, and it would flop around from one side to the other. And it was amazing on a bicycle how little wind, how fast you could go on a regular upright bicycle with just that little sail area. Otherwise, what there is a class of landsailor called a parakeet. I think it's class 8 in Europe. Here, there are a few areas where they're popular. If you can imagine a long skateboard, more like the Gravity Luge kind of a skateboard, with big tires and then a small windsurf rig. And if you wear some body armor, because you don't want to slide on the ground with something like that, but they're very efficient. Places like Burning Man, you can see them, and some of the dry lakes. There's a group that we have that follows us at Ivanpah, starting March 31st, and that's IBX, and that's the International Kite Buggy Expo. And you'll see all kinds of kite buggies. Imagine a very short, 3-4 feet wheelbase with a kite, various size kites, and they do a full 4 or 5 days of activities with kite buggies. Kite buggies can go pretty fast. I think the world record for those is up around 80 miles an hour or so, but they don't go as high against the wind, but across the wind and downwind, they have tremendous speed.
Well, my dream is to be able to pedal when there's no wind or when I'm going upwind, and then to sail when just take advantage of the wind that's there.
Some people have adapted a mini yacht. I forget which one, probably a Ludic or some other boat that came over from Europe. It's simpler, and it's where your feet are up on the front axle steering. Well, they just put pedals up there so you can pedal the front wheel. And so and surprisingly, it can be hardly 3-4 miles an hour of wind. You get going and have a little bit of less rolling resistance, and suddenly you're sailing because you've been able to get past that threshold to where you can actually maintain an angle to the wind for what you've got. There's also.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Otherwise, you have to go all the way to Loring, the former Loring Air Force Base in Maine, and they do active racing there, all kinds of boats on their runway and taxiways, or the beaches in New Jersey.
Nina will alert the local media to be on the lookout for you flying by on a trike or a velomobile holding onto a kite or something. So please get some video because we want to show that. So.
Thanks so much for your answers.
Okay,
sure.
Thank you, Nina. And quickly, let's bring Doug up if we could. Doug's got a couple of technical questions, of course. For Mark, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, you're making me itch. I was worried about thinking about the tires on there. What kind of tires and wear life are you getting out of those things?
Okay, I'll start with the tires that don't last very long at all. The blow cart class uses a 4-inch by 8-inch wheelbarrow tire, and even if it's 4-ply, when they're racing in their national races, they'll have to change tires once or twice a day. It's ridiculous. Everything else pretty much will use either a bicycle tire if it's a big diameter skinny wheel, or we'll go with a smoother, bigger tire beyond motorcycle to some of the big boats use a Hoosier. A lot of times it's the front tire on a drag racer. So it's a slick tire, maybe, 4, 5, 6 inches wide, bigger diameter. And then others, some of the boats over the years have used a slick ATV tire. But depending on the size of the boat, the little one's pretty much 6-inch wheel, 8-inch wheel, or like mine, the 24-inch wheel, 26-inch bike tire. And then beyond that, pretty much they have to go with a larger wheel, larger tire, just because they need, if you think about it, if you had a skinny tire, a very powerful, fast boat, you've got to keep the rear end from slipping out sideways. The front, pretty much, if it's got the right trim, will have enough friction with the ground. But the rear, you want to be able to convert all that lift into forward motion. So it's a trade-off. And that's why you'll see some of these skinnier tires on some of the medium-sized boats having some camber. Depending on the surface roughness, 15 to 17 degrees of camber.
Yeah, I was noticing that in some of the pictures they were really cambered in, or cambered out technically. And then the other question is, I saw almost all these look like they're in a delta configuration. Is there any tadpole with a small wheel in the back?
Well, the problem with the tadpole is you've got to have the center of effort in the sail, the center of resistance of the wheels pretty close together, one behind the other. When you go to a tadpole, if you think about it, you've got now two tires on the front with a lot more sideways resistance and not much in the back, just a single wheel. So because of that input of force in the sail or the wing being where it is, you would get up to a certain speed and then the rear end would swing around. You'd lose traction and not be able to maintain your course. So that's pretty much why it's the triangular setup.
Yeah, we have that issue with velomobiles when the rear end loses traction as well. And then I guess the last question is any of them, is there any suspension? It looks like some of them I saw had a little spring suspensions, but a lot of them look like they just used, either the Y shape or some part of the frame.
Right. What we found is that to start off, a lot of the boats come here that are fast, but they're from New Zealand or Europe for a beach. And they have a very flexible rear axle that gives them some suspension because the beaches aren't very level and may have dips and water and who knows what. Out here, they have to stiffen up the rear axle, or the even bigger boats, what they'll do is put a Springer type of suspension on the front end so that axle in the front has a little bit of give. There's only been, I think, the Sirocco steel frame boats had suspension in the back, little shock absorbers, because they were kind of designed for using in the Midwest on using fields and rougher surfaces, not a dry lake. The other thing is Nevada really has no salt
dry lakes. They're all what are called playas. They're made out of alkaline mud of whatever came down off the mountains. Because Nevada has the most 310 mountain ranges. So it's the most mountainous state in the nation, and a lot of U-shaped valleys with this alkaline mud laying in the bottom of them.
Last question I got for you, is there tandem or multi-rider configurations?
Yes, the Mana Twin can hold 2 people. Even the little blow cart, you can get a little passenger seat that goes outside the pod or next to the sling seat. Then above that, there was a boat made for training purposes in Europe called the Promo, and there was a training Promo, and it was set up to carry 2 people. It had a wider body. Other than that, the only other ones that have been out here that could carry 2 people besides the Mana Twin were ice boats such as the Night class, where it was a wide body and the seat wide enough. Another one is the Friendship, which you could probably carry 2 people in that. It's a very large one design boat built in Southern California.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thanks for the questions, Doug. And all right, I think we're going to finish it right there, Mark. BJ did send me a private message here asking about the Rands question. He said he did find that Rands built sail trikes in the 1970s, considerably before your time. We'll look into that. I don't know anything about that, but BJ will be up next. Maybe he knows a little bit more too. But.
Yeah, there were many small manufacturers in Southern California and other parts of the country, and they tried different things, whether it's a mini yacht or one that was a larger design.
Okay. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough for contacting me and sharing your vast knowledge on these Landsailers. Fascinating subject. Looks like a lot of fun. We wish you all the best with it, and I hope we'll talk again soon.
Okay, and don't forget.
Yeah, you're disappearing with that, but your links,
links.
Mark has given me all the links if you're interested in more information, and we're going to have them in the description below for the organizations involved and how you guys can get involved if you're interested, right?
Yep, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Mark. Thanks, pal. All right, folks, let's then move along to BJ Strass, who is a guy who fixes old recumbent seats, actually can work on newer recumbent seats and upgrade them. We're going to find all about that right now. All right, we are here with BJ Strass, and he's going to talk to us today about recumbent bike seat fixes. So, BJ, how you doing today?
Very good, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. All right. I think maybe we'll open up, if we could, BJ, with your recumbent history. You've got quite an interesting one. Can you tell us a little bit about the background you have with recumbents?
Sure, Gary. To my knowledge, I had the first recumbent bike shop in Sacramento, California, opened the first one there, and had that for a few years. I began riding about 1991, and handled then when I transitioned into my small shop, I sold different brands. That's a Rands Rocket there, one of the earliest ones. It has a square tube frame, which those are pretty rare. So I sold Rands, I sold Vision. That bike there is my first recumbent that I built from a frame set. Sold Easy Racers, Linear, et cetera, et cetera. This particular photo was at the Interbike show, where I bought one of the very first Rands V-Rexes directly from the Schlitter brothers, right off the floor there. This photo is from a tour my wife and I did down the Pacific coast from Victoria, Canada to California. And she's riding one of the earliest Visions, and I was riding a Counterpoint Presto. And you can see how much stuff we're carrying. This was a later photo of a Vision R40 of mine, and I was leading a tour of about 10 riders through the Napa Valley wine country on this one. And that's the Counterpoint Presto, of which I rode down the Pacific coast with. And this was, I believe, in Davis, California, probably about 1995, where we were asked to bring our shop over essentially and set up at a festival there to show off the bikes. If I recall correctly, it was an alternative energy festival. And this bike is the Meridian, and this was a bike that I actually designed and built and sold on a very limited basis. This was number one. It was built with a 16-inch front wheel or 20-inch underseat remote link steering or direct, as this one is. And essentially, I would see what the customer wanted and then build the bike to their desire. This unusual looking thing was called a Golf E. And Bike E had sent me this person who wanted to have a human-powered golf cart, essentially. And so I was contracted to build it. It's a Delta Trike design. You can't tell in the photo, but the rear wheels are dual wheels. So it's two rims welded together with two tires on each side to keep it from sinking into the grass on golf courses. And on the back there is a rack to strap a golf bag on. This one was one of the many organized event rides that my wife and I and also some riding friends did. And I believe this was the Delta Century, which took place in the Central Valley, south of California, or south of Sacramento in California.
All right, BJ, great. Interesting. What was the name of your store in Sacramento?
The store I had in Sacramento was Introspect Cycle, and then later I took over management of Atlantic Bicycle in Margate, Florida, which is in the Fort Lauderdale area. And then after that, I went to work for Bike E Corporation in Corvallis, Oregon. Right,
the ill-fated Bike E, as it turns out. So
yeah, I was supposedly the last employee of Bike E.
All right. Let's get to the issue at hand, and that is the seat repair. How did you get involved with repairing or fixing recumbent seats?
Well, it was kind of out of necessity, out of being extremely cheap in some ways, and having the ability to do a lot of different things. I picked up a recumbent that I needed a seat for, and it was a good used Vision, but the mesh seat on it was completely deteriorated, and of course Vision at this point has been out of business for around 20 years, and so I had a little upholstery hobby that I had redone a couple of RVs and some other things on the side, and out of necessity I made my own seat, and it worked out pretty well. And someone on the bike trail had seen it and said, well, could you do one for me? And it was for a different type of bike, and I did that. And if you're familiar with Bob Bryant, the former editor of Recumbent Cyclist News, he's a good friend of mine, and I was telling him about that. And he said, I think there's a big need out there for this type of thing. You should try to put the word out there. And I also have a tech background, so I threw up a website and started taking orders and let the word get around. And that was about 2.5 years back, I guess.
Wow, nice. All right. Well, let's start talking about the actual services that you perform on these seats. Can you tell us about what you can do for the folks, the customers?
Well, primarily, I make new seats for recumbents, virtually any recumbent. And these are all custom seats that I design, and I try to design the seats so that it doesn't have the drawbacks that many of the original seats do. So in making improvements on them, I've also do custom seat pads and have done a few of those for people that had special physical needs for one reason or another. And I can make sure that in a new seat that it is stronger in some areas. Also, I do some repair of a few seats. Most seats are too old to really do a good repair on, but a repair modification, I can repair panniers, other bags, and other soft gear for recumbents. And like I said, on occasion, on seats that can be repaired, I can fix split seams or rips or tears in those.
Sounds good. Now, What sorts of brands can you handle? There's plenty of old recumbent brands out there. What ones have you handled, and what can you do there?
Sure, Gary. The seats I do the most of are for Vision recumbents. Vision, from my knowledge, Vision was the #2 selling recumbent in their heyday in the world. And so there's a lot of those out there, and they all use the sling mesh type seats, or the hammock style seats, as some call. So about 70% of the seats I make are for Visions. But I can do one for virtually any recumbent out there. And I've actually done some seats for a couple of custom kayaks as well. Excuse me. Probably the most unusual seats I've done are for the original Avatar 2000, which was the first production recumbent in the United States back in the 70s. And I've also been doing some seats for the ELF or ELF, Organic Transport Hybrid Pedal Electric Car. It has a tube frame for the seat. Essentially, I can make a seat for it. Some type of sling mesh seat for it, or seat back, say like the Rans or the Easy Racers cool back seats where they have the foam bottom and the mesh backs. I do quite a lot of those as well.
Excellent. Okay. Now, how about the features of the seats that you fix? Tell us about what are the top features of them?
Okay. Well, on my new seats, I have some primary features, which I have, I guess you could say, kind of developed to help solve or to enhance my seat over the original in many ways. And one of the primary is what I call the dish. And the dish is kind of a contour at the back of your butt. Most recumbent seats are sewn from a flat panel. And so at the back of your bottom, the seat is flat, and eventually it may stretch some, but it will never entirely fit. And so I sew in a contour into that. Now, some like Vision have done that, but certainly most recumbents do not. Another feature is that my seat is a lace-on design. And the benefit of a lace-on design is that, like sneakers, wearing shoes with laces, once you tie them and you use them, it will adjust itself to your foot as you're walking and using them. So the recumbent seat, that's a lace-on design, will as well. The problem with past recumbent lace-on seats is that they use grommets. Grommets are metal. They eventually will pull away from the material. So I came up with a lace loop design, is what I call. And I borrowed this, so to speak, from some high-end running shoes I had seen. And they are webbing loops that are sewn into the back of the seat. So one, they don't pull away as grommets will. My lace loops have a 2-inch surface area of pull tension, whereas a grommet has about a 1/2 inch. And also the lace loops, because they're webbing, they can conform around the seat braces or cross tubes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one. Number two is something I call a torque strap. Now, some recumbents will have the seat mesh very tight. And the reason for that is so you don't lose performance when you're accelerating or pedaling hard or climbing, because you will get a flex out of the seat. However, the drawback to that is that if the seat mesh is very tight, it doesn't conform to your body very well. And so you lose comfort. My solution for that is that with the lace loop, you can leave that taut, not super tight, so it will conform to your body. But I have a feature I call a torque strap. And the torque strap is a very heavy-duty webbing strap that completely encompasses the seat frame, sewn to the back of the seat mesh, about the lumbar area. And it has a heavy-duty buckle. So when you install my seat, you tighten that torque strap nice and snug, very tight. And it gives you some lower back support, some lumbar. In fact, I sew it on in such a way that if someone wants more lumbar support, they can purchase a seat pad, or I'm sorry, a seatbelt pad for their car, with a shoulder pad, and slip it over, and that gives more support. The biggest benefit of the torque strap is that when you're climbing or accelerating, you push into your lower back, and that helps to transfer your power to a stronger part of the seat frame. And also you lose less power from the flexing of the seat mesh. And then the third part is, as I said before, the dish and the seat. And there are other features in there which I will tailor to that particular brand or that particular seat. Like in some areas, I will put a wear patch to where if on the original seat it tended to wear through, I would put a reinforcement in that area. So
very good. All right. BJ, are there some customizations that you can do if a customer wants particular options for these seats? Can you accommodate them?
Sure, Gary. I have some, I guess you would say, standard options, and I have two different styles of seat mesh. They are the exact same brand of seat mesh and the same material, and it's a very high quality mesh. It's quite expensive, but one is a higher density. And I generally will only recommend that for very heavy riders, very, very strong riders, or riders that will use their bike in extreme weather situations. The standard mesh flows air better because the weave is not as tight, but that is an option. I can also do special reinforcements for stronger or heavier riders. I do seat bottom pads out of various foam materials, and I also have a very rare honeycomb gel material, which will actually flow air and moisture straight through it, but give you the comfort of a gel pad. And then, as I'd said before, I can do special customizations for people that have special needs. One of the things I virtually always do is when someone shows interest in one of my seats, I call them and talk to them. We have a conversation about what they need in a seat.
I love the personalized service there. That makes all the difference.
Thank you.
All right, BJ, let's hone in a little bit into the actual work that you do and how it's done. I'd love to take a close look at this. I think we've got a video that we can show. Can you tell us about the process of fixing these seats?
Sure. Well, in this video, I am making a new Rand seat back, and as you can see, it has the lips on the side. And it also has that large strap there in the center or toward the bottom. That is the torque strap, which I'd mentioned earlier. And all of my seats are sewn a lot. They have a lot of stitching in them to give extra reinforcement in as many areas as possible. But also, I try to make sure that in areas where the seat could create, a bit of irritation, maybe on the stock seat, is that doesn't happen with my seats.
Very good. All right, so let's look at how you lay this out. I think we have a shot here. Yeah, tell us about the layout process, how this all works.
Sure. Well, this is my standard mesh, and as you can see, it's fairly opaque, so it flows air very well, but amazingly, it doesn't stretch all that much. And so in doing a seat for a customer, it can vary from, let's say, like a Vision seat. So on a Vision seat, I have some cardboard templates. I pull those out. I put those on, mark them off, make my cuts, and then we'll start making the seat. But on something that's more rare, say like the Avatar 2000, I can work off of measurements and photos from the bike owner, or they can send me the original seat and I can use it. But I do my layout with my design, and you can see the back here of the seat with my design. It has the lower, this is a Rands once again, and has the lower lace, it has the torque strap, then it has the upper lacing on there. And that's the front view of the Rands seat. This particular shot is a Lightning P38. I've been doing a few more of those seats as the word's gotten around. And my seat design is considerably different from the original. From what some riders have been telling me is that their seats don't last very long. They're ripping out. And so my design uses the heavy duty mesh, but it also has reinforcements and more adjustments to make the seat fit the seat frame better.
All right, great, BJ. So if you could, then let's take a look at a summary then of this process.
Sure. On this particular seat, this was for a slipstream, a long bike slipstream, and So on my seat, it has the wraparound design. Some recumbents have that, some do not, but it wraps around to the back. And then you can see where the green arrow also is for the dished seat bottom. And this seat was not dished originally. And so it has the contour sewn into the seat bottom that is pre-fit to the back of a rider's bottom. This next one you can see from the back, it shows the lace loops and also the torque strap and the way the seat is laced on. And you can also see how it conforms to the crossbars on the seat without having to leave a huge uneven gap from the lacing. It will just conform around to where it needs to go.
Excellent. All right. Well, I see right over your left shoulder the amazing sewing machine that you use, and there's a couple other pieces of equipment that you use. Tell us what you.
Well, this machine is actually not the one I'm using currently. I recently switched over. I've constantly strived to get a machine that will do the better job for my particular need. And this one did a great job, but the one I'm using now does even better. And these machines are incredibly, incredibly expensive. And then I have to specially set them up. So I buy them used. I've taught myself to refurbish them and then set them up specifically for what I do. This machine is a very unusual looking item. It is a Chinese-made clone of a late 1800s shoe patching machine. And the idea is that you can slip a boot or a shoe over this machine and sew a patch into the toe of it. And I've modified it and specially set it up. And yes, it is a hand crank machine so that I can get inside of panniers and bags and such to be able to repair a seam or sew a patch on without having to take the entire item apart and then reconstruct it. And this machine, I just love this old machine. This is about a 1945 Singer model, and it was a machine that was very popular with the Navy during World War II for making sails and riggings. And this is my backup machine. I can sew seats perfectly well on it. It's just not nearly as fast, as it does not have a reverse. And the bobbin, the bottom thread capacity on it's quite a lot smaller than my primary machine, the one behind me here.
All right. Well, I don't think we can complete this story properly without showing some before and after pictures. But right before we get to that, tell us a little bit about what you do. This is a new ice seat that you have made modifications to. Is that right?
Yeah, what I did was on the ice trikes, the wonderful British trikes, the seat mesh is one of the many that are sewn out of one flat panel. And so in making a new seat for it, I have used my design with the lace loops, with the torque strap, but the big feature on this one is the contour, the dish at the back of the rider's bottom. And this works particularly well on the ice trike seats because the seating area, the bottom area on these trikes is very short and doesn't always fit a larger American anatomy very well. So this allows the rider to sit back as much as an inch and a half farther. Because I had the old original seat on this, I took the embroidered logo, cut it out of the top, turned it into a patch, and then sewed it onto the top for the seat.
Very nice. All right, now let's look at some older seats that you have worked on, and let's compare and contrast.
Sure. This was the photo of the old seat was one that the writer has sent me and said, well, this is my original seat. And of course, it's original vision seat, so it's 20 or more years old, and it was coming apart. And so the seat on the right is one of my replacements, and this replacement is in the high density mesh. The photo on the left, the older seat, is a Rand seat back, probably about a 2002, 2003. So obviously it's quite old as well. And then on the right is my new seat back on it. And I've also put on this particular seat, I rebuilt the entire seat. I put a new Rand seat pad on it and a new seat bottom cover.
Very good. All right. Now, let's talk specifics about the customer's experience here. Can you tell us about pricing and how the shipping works. They have to send it to you, you have to send it to them, and the turnaround time these days.
As far as pricing, for a full seat, it starts out at $165 with no options. And as far as a seat back, it's according to the model, but the least expensive, the bikey with the short back, and they start out at about $75, $80. A Rand's seat back or a Easy Racer's cool back, they start at $125, and options go up from there. And this is plus shipping. I'm also doing international as well. I've had inquiries from Britain, and I've shipped a few seats to Canada. So I can do that. The shipping is whatever the price is for me to ship to those places. Domestic shipping is according to the size and what the options are, but it starts at around $14 on a seat, and it's a priority mail for the shipping on that. Turnaround time completely varies. I encourage people to order their seats during the cold weather for me, because that's when I'm doing most of my sewing. During the warm weather, I'm trying to get out and ride some and enjoy it. But the way I work it is I will put someone on what I call a pre-order list, and essentially it's a waiting list. And they say, yeah, I want to order a seat. So when my name comes up, let me know. And so when their name comes up, I usually take 3 to 4 people at a time off the pre-order list. We'll contact them, say, you still want a seat? Is this what you want? If it's yes, then I will invoice them through PayPal, electronic invoice. Once I get notification of that, they go onto the sewing list. And then on the sewing list, I really try to get seats out within a couple of weeks, but it can take as long as a month. It's all according to how materials are coming in at this time. As you know, with the supply and demand on virtually everything, but it's affected the bicycle industry as well. Prices are constantly changing, and the ability to get the things I need to make these seats varies. But I try to keep it around 2 weeks.
All right, BJ. And you mentioned you getting out to ride a little bit, and give us a quick update on what you're riding these days. And you've had some health issues to deal with as well, and that affect your riding. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I had needed a knee replacement for a long time and was putting it off. And finally, a little under 2 years ago, had my knee replacement. And so this particular photo was my first event ride. My wife and I have always loved to do event rides. So this was our first event ride, and it was the Ride to End Alls, which is the Ride to End Alzheimer's in the Fort Collins area of Colorado. And I'm riding a new 2021 Terra Trike Rambler wide track in the photo there. I'm a pretty big guy, and so it's a big trike, and it fits me well. Unfortunately, it doesn't have my seat on it yet, making a new seat for it. I have a garage overflowing with various recumbents and recumbent trikes. And during the summer, when I find a little bit of extra time, I refurbish recumbents and resell them to people that can use them, and try to make it a couple of dollars and get them a bike at a good price as well.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, BJ, that's wonderful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing the interesting work that you do with the recumbent community here on Laidback Bike Report. Can you tell us how folks can find out more or get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Absolutely. The best way is to go through my website, which is Weebly, WEEBLY.recumbentseatfix.com. And it has examples of my seats. It has explanations of the seats and other services I offer. If I have any bikes for sale at the time, those will be there. And it has obviously the contact page where someone can contact me for information, and I can get back to them and we can discuss their seating needs.
Perfect. Well, of course, we are going to put that information in the description below for our viewers to be able to click on and get a hold of you, find out more about you. BJ Strass, thank you so much for spending a little time with us today. And we hope to talk again soon.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, let's talk right now, guys. There's BJ. He's with us live. And BJ, welcome.
Well, thanks, Gary. It's good to be with you and the crew here.
It's great to have you with us. We're going to briefly sum things up here, and I got a couple quick questions before we move along. First, BJ did misspeak when he was talking about his website address, but we did have the correct information there on the screen. And of course, like I said, it'll be in the description below. So we have that. You'll be able to get a hold of BJ then that way. Trey, if you could pop Denny and Nina up real quickly, that would be great. Denny, you had a question about the seat. There may be some confusion, BJ, that we want to clear up here about the hardware parts of the seats and what you do and don't do. Denny, what was your question?
Yeah, I was wondering if he had the seat stays for the Tour Easy. I'm in the need of one right now. Okay. So it's like a 3/8 aluminum rod.
Sure,
with a,
sure.
Yeah, you're familiar with them. I'm
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. And one of my wife's bikes is a Tour Easy. Excuse me. The thing, essentially, the thing I do as far as the seats is the soft parts, or you can say the fabric parts. Okay. Now, or in some cases the foam parts as well. Now, because of my background in recumbents, from being a rider since the dinosaurs roamed the earth, from being a dealer and working for a recumbent manufacturer as well, I've kind of compiled a lot of extraneous knowledge in there, and I try to be a resource as well. An example would be that I have people that have contacted me about an Easy Racer seat pan that's cracking. And of course, the Easy Racer's been going for a while now. There's Easy Racers that have been out there forever. And those carbon seat pans, like all things will, start to crack over time. I don't repair those, but I try to be a resource for those people. And one of the things I've done recently is I've put a resource page on my website, and I've started listing some of the, I guess you could say, more unusual things up there, like where do you go to get a internal gear hub rebuilt, for example. So as far as the seat stays, do I have those or do I make those? No. But if you'd like to contact me, I can probably give you some information on getting that done.
Cool beans.
All right. Thank you for the question, Denny. And Nina has maybe a couple of comments here as well. A special connection, I understand. Go ahead, Nina.
Well, yeah, my beloved Tie Rush has your seat back on it, which it desperately needed because I couldn't get one from Easy Racers. So really glad you're doing this work.
Well, I'd like to kick in that Nina was instrumental in helping me develop my seat back for the Easy Racers coolback seats. And so in the case of the Easy Racers with the coolback, I do two versions. I do my design, which is what most people order, or I can also make the panel like the original. If they want something that looks original and works like the original, I can also do those panels as well.
Yeah, I have the original style. Is your Chandler machine a walking foot?
It is a triple feed, is what it's called. It is a walking foot, needle feed, and has the feed dogs on the bottom as well. I could sew through my hand if I'm not careful with it. And it has a very, very high lift. It's a very specific machine. And it's technically a Juki that was branded as Chandler. So.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a sewing machine nerd as well.
Oh, great. Okay.
Are you training anyone to replace you? Because I'm a little, like, what happens in the future? Those of us.
Am I dying?
Not well. We're all dying.
Something I don't know.
All of us are dying.
I think she's volunteering. Maybe.
No, I'm definitely not. But I'm like, how am I going to get my next? In the distant future.
And, I guess you could say, kind of. To toot my own horn a little bit in this, is that most of the recumbent seats, as in Gary and I talking earlier, I'd mentioned that all the recumbent manufacturers out there, virtually every one, had a different seat. And it kind of became redundant because you have 5 or 6 design recumbent seats that's probably going to work for most people across the board. every Trek doesn't have a specific seat for their specific bike, et cetera, et cetera. There are different seats. And I think that would have been beneficial in the recumbent industry, particularly as far as seeing two-wheeled recumbents stick around longer. I'm sorry, I lost track.
Well, I think we'll leave it there and just make the overall announcement for anyone seeking to be an apprentice to contact you to learn about all those intricacies of those machines.
You want to learn?
I didn't understand any of that, but
I would totally want to learn if I weren't doing the other things that I'm doing.
Right. I know you're a little bit.
I guess the long way to my point was that I was able to come up with the design for my seat through all the years of writing and design around recumbent, et cetera, so that I had design features that I could incorporate into different seats. If it's like a vision seat where templates or something like that, somebody could be easily taught to do that. But right now I'm working on a Penninger Traveler, and that is a very unusual seat because it's a true hammock seat. It's not attached on the side, it's suspended in the front and in the back. And so I have to design that from scratch, essentially. And I'm sure there are plenty of other people that can do it, but it's a pain.
I'm going to say that last statement is not true. And you are a unique individual that has unique skills. I'm sure Nina would agree with that.
Well, thank you very much, Gary.
All right, Nina, thank you for the question. We're going to send you back. And BJ, thanks again, pal. We really appreciate it. We will be in touch. Maybe you can keep us updated on whatever is coming up next with you. And with that, I think we're going to say goodbye.
Certainly. Thanks a lot for having me on. And I'm really thrilled to be exposed to people through the report here.
It's great to have you. Thanks, BJ. All right, guys. I think with that, we're going to move along to our next segment, which is Dr. Craig Cornelius. He's going to talk to us about some design considerations when building recumbents. It's called the bent packaging problem. Let's have a look.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Craig Cornelius back to talk to you more about human-powered vehicle issues. Today, I'd like to talk about what I call the supine recumbent packaging problem. Now, I think we'd all agree that the modern upright bicycle is a marvelous machine. With relative simplicity, we get some very sophisticated function. A 25-pound bicycle can double the average rider's speed, so that's pretty impressive performance. That being said, there are people who are still looking for an improvement on that, and one of the areas that comes up for improvement is the recumbent bicycle. Now, people have been designing recumbents probably since the late 1800s or early 1900s. Progress was squelched by the Union Cyclist International in the 30s when they didn't like the speed advantages of recumbents, and they outlawed them. Subsequently, people like Alex Moulton of the Little Wheel Moulton fame looked at recumbents when he was thinking about the redesign of the bicycle. Unfortunately, he must have got one where the posture wasn't very good because he said it wasn't too uncomfortable to ride for long periods of time. We all know that's not true. After that, in the 70s, Dr. David Gordon Wilson went through 5 iterations on recumbent designs, and he ended up with design 5 being the Avatar 2000. Wilson's motivation was to come up with a safer bicycle, but other reasons to look at recumbents are comfort and aerodynamics. So no matter who's working on the design, there's a problem. And the problem is for a supine front-steered recumbent bicycle with a good weight distribution, meaning more weight on the rear than the front, but not too much more. The cranks end up in the same location as the front wheel, so that's not a good thing. So compared with an upright bicycle, a recumbent will have one or more complications. And here's a list that I compiled of the complications. Difficult to start, unstable at low speed, steering that is perturbed by pedal forces, limited steering lock, steering that displaces the pedals laterally relative to the rider's pelvis, unequal size wheels, excessive length, unbalanced weight distribution. I'm saying ideal is 50 to 65% on the driving wheel. More than one drive chain and need for an intermediate jack shaft and chain tensioners, and indirect steering. So I compiled about 10 different approaches to do recumbents and kind of go through the pros and cons of each of them. So the first one is to put the front wheel ahead of the cranks. And on the left, you see Dave Wilson with the Avatar 2000. And on the right is your typical easy racer. Issues are indirect steering is required on the Avatar. There's a lightly loaded front wheel that could wash out on slippery surfaces and difficult to transport. So another approach is to put the front wheel behind the cranks. On the left is a Revat recumbent from the 1930s, and on the right is a more contemporary hypercycle. Issues are you get a lot of wear on your front wheel, and because there is so much weight on the steered wheel, they're unstable at high speeds. Third approach talk about is put the pedals above the front wheel. So on the left is Francois Favre on a Mochette Velo car, and this is the bike that caused the UCI so much trouble because Favre was beating famous sprinters on track races. On the right is my attempt to do that. I was kind of inspired by a German professor named Paul Schirndorf, and he had some different recumbent designs, and he had a design where the cranks were getting very near the front wheel. So fourth approach is to have the cranks overlapping the front wheel. And on the upper left is one of my designs. It's actually a trike, but for our purposes, it works the same way. I could get about 28 degrees wheel lock with 165 millimeter cranks and 128 millimeter bottom bracket. And we'll talk about the crank axle in the bottom bracket. We'll talk about this a little more. On the right, of course, is the famous Velo Tilt with its cool drive system. It's got a roll-off transmission there. And on the bottom is the Aero Velo Streamliner, which is the world's fastest sprint bike. Issues are limited steering lock, either crank to wheel or leg to wheel interference. Now, if you experimented, you'd find in a normal pedal riding situation, you need very little wheel lock to go around corners and things like that. And of course, at high speed, you will need almost no wheel lock. And you may require 2 drive chains and an intermediate jack shaft because there is no room with some of the designs to have the chain rings attached to the power crank. So this is an approach using a non-circular cycling path above the wheel. And the idea was to squish the cycling path down so it's longer than it's high. On the left is, I think, my favorite picture of an old recumbent. It's Oscar Egg from the 30s. Oscar Egg was a world hour record holder, and he dabbled in trying to get the recumbent hour record back. And you can see his cranks go back and forth, and they pull on the secondary set of cranks. One thing that's required with this, because of trouble getting over the dead centers, is a fixed gear, which Oscar Egg had no trouble. On the right is a drawing from Dave Wilson for a similar system. And on the bottom is my attempt to do that. If you look at the bottom picture, if you look at the pedal, you'll see the outside of the pedal is supported on a framework that really is only the pedal support. On the inside of the pedal is a connecting rod that connects to the cranks. It's really packaged very well. Unfortunately, I could not get over even the most gradual hills because of the dead spots. So it got cut up and moved to the garbage heap. So another approach, and I've got a 6A and 6B, is to attach the bottom bracket to a fork and drive the front wheel with a chain. So most of you can recognize the cruise bike, and this is somebody else's interpretation, the front runner. Pedal forces perturb the steering. That's probably the biggest issue. And the degree of perturbation is, if you look at the axis of the steering and you look at basically the axis of the foot during the power stroke, the closer those two are to 90 degrees, the more perturbation you're going to get. The other thing is the crank axle moves laterally, so there might be some knee-related problems with that. So this is 6B. This is attaching the pedals directly to the steering fork, but having a more conventional steering pivot that goes through the center of the wheel. On the left is a Crypto Bantam. Basically, the Crypto Bantam was one of the early safety bicycles. Envision the fact that it has a geared, a little gearbox in the hub that makes the wheels smaller. So it's a high wheeler with a reduced wheel. And you can see in this case, the pedal forces are basically horizontal and the steering axis is vertical, so you're going to get perturbations there. The other one is the G4, which Mr. Thompson's been on Gary's show. It looks very similar to the Crypto Bantam, except things are laid back. And what the laid back does is it transfers the weight more to the non-driving wheel. So there is an undesirable weight distribution, and it has lots of chains. So I knew you could basically put the crank axle through the center of the hub and front hub and steer the front wheel. This is done in motorcycles. They call it hub center steering. So I went looking on the internet to see if I could find a picture of that. And lo and behold, the Leonardo of bicycle design, Mike Burrows, had a design that did that with his Rat Racer from 2004 that he moved on from. I guess he crashed it a few times. Just on a side note, by the time Burrows got to this design, he was running 145 millimeter cranks. Burrows is a big believer in short cranks on recumbent bicycles. So with this design, the steering lock is of course limited. by the wheel motion during steering. And if you drove the front wheel, you would need 2 drive chains. So the holy grail for me back in the 70s and the early 80s, I thought, boy, could I get a cool package if I could steer the rear wheel. And I had several people say, you know, rear wheel steering bicycles are unstable. You just can't do it. And I was stubborn. The start was not the 1978 plywood Flyer. The steering wheel is basically a 4-bar linkage with a small amount of positive trail. The steering axis was a little bit ahead of the tire. Trouble getting started, which is why you can see the training wheels. What I would do, I'd ride it on a playground. I would start in an arc, leaning on one of the wheels, and when I got up to speed, then I could ride it straight. I ran into to go backwards. I'm a big believer in Santa Anna's quote that those that can't remember history are forced to repeat it. And if you're a bike designer, you should know your history because undoubtedly somebody's done what you're doing before. I found a picture from the late 1800s from a book on the Smithsonian's bicycle collection called the Laidback Velocipede. And basically the Laidback Velocipede had its steering pivot in the middle of the bike, very similar to what you see on the right. Pedals were direct drive to the front wheel, and the rider's weight was basically sitting on the pivot, so we could say the rider's weight was on the front segment. So I looked at that, and I was having trouble doing my starting. In fact, my typical test was I would do a design, just sit in the parking lot, push off on the pedals once, and if I couldn't balance by the time I got the second pedal engaged, the design was a failure. So I looked at Laidback's thing and said, well, what does a lot of trail do? So, you know, regular bike might have several inches of trail. You know, what happens when you have 20 inches of trail? Well, it turned out when I went to longer trail, low speed stability got better. And the reason for that one of the reasons for that is if you look at a regular bike, and we've all done this, and you hold it by the saddle and you lean it to, let's say you lean it to the right, you'll notice that the fork steers into the turn. So that I would call steering into the lean. Well, when you have long trail bike, it does the opposite. It leans into the steer. So you steer to the right and the whole bike just kind of flips over because of the balance of forces. So that was a good thing. Some of the long trail approaches I think I had one bike that had 48 inches of trail, which means the wheel was hanging way out in the back. Well, having that much trail might have helped at low speed stability, but it wasn't going to package very well. So I and my cohort at the time, Jerry Onifer, built a version in the middle, which is what I call a 4-bar Flyer. It had a 4-bar linkage that gave you a lot of trail when the wheel was centered and reduced the trail as you went into your steering lock. Well, abandoned that and kind of just went for what I call a moderate trail thing, you know, something on the order of 15 or 16 inches. And that ended up being the Valero from 1988. Went from wood to a tubular chassis. The Valero had a problem that at very low speeds, like at walking speeds, you'd have to lean back, you'd weave back and forth a lot. However, once you got up to speed, it was pretty well behaved. the last ride I took it out for a 50-mile ride on some of the back roads around Seattle. And I had to take out any of the steep hills because I couldn't balance it correctly at the steep hills. But I was finishing up my ride and pulling up behind my car. And another cyclist pulled up behind me and he said, "You know, buddy," he said, "you weren't riding very straight." And I said, "You know, buddy," I said, "this is a rear steering bicycle." So I considered it was pretty successful. Now, epilogue here is you may see pictures of rear steering recumbents that look very similar to this. I wrote a long article on my experiences in the Human Powered magazine for the Human Powered Vehicle Association. So other people have seen it and other people have copied it. But it's tantalizing because of how the package looks. I mean, everything is in the right place. It just has one little biting problem. So you can get even crazier than rear steering, and that's to ride your bicycle backwards. Now, this is the EV Stretto. It is the fastest hour record bicycle out there. It did about 57 miles in an hour, so it's very, very impressive. Now, the rear ridden bicycle is not a new concept. A guy named Milt Raymond played with this in the later 80s, and Gary might remember the Oregon State entered a bike called the Buckeye Bullet in one of the Human Powered Speed Championships, and it also was ridden backwards. So I leave you with a final thought. This is what I am calling the headset bottom bracket layout, and it's similar to one of the ones where we saw in the picture for cranks overlapping the front wheel. It has disadvantages, but it has some advantages, and I like to think of it as it would have been the next evolutionary step that Dave Wilson would have pursued after the Avatar. Now, the bottom bracket you can see is right behind the fork crown there. So to ensure that I have a reasonable wheel lock, I'm using a long bottom bracket axle, and it's 128 millimeters, which is about as you know, it gives you as about a big a Q as you can get on a regular bicycle component. So if you're anti-big Q, meaning your pedals are spaced too far apart, this design isn't for you. But some of the things that it did over the Avatar is it dropped the overall length by a foot. So the Avatar had like a 63-inch wheelbase. This has a 51-inch wheelbase. Avatar's bottom bracket was about 13 inches high. This one is about almost 3 inches higher, but I'm a low bottom bracket person. I feel it's easy to start and stop and comfortable to ride. So I'm cool with that. Has a very good weight distribution. The problem with the Avatar was with the 31% on the front wheel. This bumps it up to about 40%. And the second bottom bracket allows, in my case, I want to add arm power to the design. So I'm using the non-chainring side, or the left side of the secondary bottom bracket to input power. Now, if you're going to run a single chainring, and it's getting very easy to run single chainrings because of the wide mountain bike gearing, I've got a cassette that's 9 to 50 teeth, which is just kind of totally crazy in 12 steps. So I wouldn't need to use a intermediate bottom bracket. But I recommend it to you if you're looking to build kind of a medium wheelbase, comfortable seating position design. So that's what I can tell you about the recumbent packaging problem. So if any of you are interested in more details on my years of recumbent and human-powered vehicle projects, you can look for Left-Handed Cyclist, all one word. And there's about 30 plus posts in there. Most of them are about 2,000 words, so they're quite wordy, but I think you might find them very fun and informative. So thank you for looking.
All right, and there's Craig. How are we doing today, Craig?
Pretty good, Gary. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for that really interesting discussion on all those different kinds of designs. I have one comment here that I'd like you to have a look at and see what you think, having to do with the environment itself. So you talked about all those different kinds of designs, and you did mention how you couldn't get up the hills on a couple of those things. So could you basically just give us a short idea of what your thoughts are on how and where you're riding has to do with how you design your bike?
Well, you know, where you're riding, I think the biggest influence might be to mountain bikers. I mean, there's hills in my neighborhood. There's a hill in my neighborhood that I call the Wall, and it is about a quarter mile long. And the problem is you're going so slowly that if you have to put your foot down, you can't get started. But you know, where I ride on the road, I expect to be able to get up anything I run into on my bicycle. And even on a mountain bike, I expect that. So I think, you know, with the invention of variable gearing at the turn of the end of 1900s, a bike should pretty much be able to do everything. And you know, short of designing something that's a speed machine, for an all-purpose machine, versatility, I think, is probably the watchword.
Right. I would agree with that. All right. We are running a little behind, Craig. So thank you again so much for taking all the time that you take to share these wonderful thoughts with our audience. I hope we'll see you again soon with another subject. And guys, the Left-Handed Cyclist, that is Craig's blog, and we hope you'll take a look at that for lots of other interesting ideas that he's written down for you. So Craig, have a good one, and thanks.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, guys. All right, we have a couple of short segments left here. First, Peter Stull is going to talk to us a little bit about an interaction he had with a young man who had some balancing issues and how he took care of him. I think you guys will enjoy this. Let's have a look.
Hi, I'm Peter from the Bicycle Man, and we're going to talk today about putting a trike into a car with 3 people. That wouldn't be all that difficult, except this car is a Chevy Trax, which is a tiny, teeny little SUV. So they came in, and the son rode a bunch of trikes. He wanted a trike because he has some balance issues. So he rode this TerraTrike Traveler, and he rode a red Cat Trike Trail, which I can't show you because it's in the car. And they went home. And he also rode a Greenspeed X7. He liked the Greenspeed and the Cat Trike. He's a young, energetic guy, and he liked the lower seat and the sportier feel of those 2 bikes. They liked the fact that the Cat Trike was a little less expensive than the Greenspeed, and that when it folded up, it all latched together into a single package, so it was easy to pick up and stick in the car. So that's the introduction, and watch the video and see what you think. It was a tight fit, I'll tell you right now. fixed. Looking close. Yep, we're there.
Great.
So this is a Chevy Trax, and a Cat Trike trail. We folded down the big side of the rear seat, folded the trike, and stuck it in backside first, and it fits. Now, I'm going to get the seat belt for this back seat that's folded, and put it around the bike just to hold it in place for safety and just keep it moving around. Who's going to ride in the back seat with the bike? Hop in and see if you fit. All right. Hey.
Great job, Peter. Thank you so much for saying that. We wish all the luck in the world to that young man with his new Cat Trike trail. Hope you enjoy that. All right, let's move along to the sports report with Denny.
Just a quick update before the season gets underway full speed. This past weekend at the Pace Bend Ultra in Spicewood, Texas, John Crawford was the only recumbent entered. He did 111 miles in a 24-hour race. Congratulations, John, for getting out there. Coming up next weekend, February 19th and 20th, is a Sebring 100, 12, and 24-hour race in Sebring, Florida. This is a long-standing endurance race held every February in sunny Florida. It's sponsored by the Sebring Rotary Club and is the Daytona of ultracycling. Racers from all over the country and internationally attend this unique open-road closed-course race. The Century 12-hour, 24-hour race start with 3 laps on the 3.4-mile Sebring Road race course, then out on the open road for an out-and-back 45-mile course. The Century race finishes at the racetrack, and the 12 and 24-hour continue on an 11.7-mile open road loop. The loop starts and finishes in a parking area at the racetrack. Racers ride the loop until 5:30 p.m. and then are allowed back on the racetrack. The 12-hour racers finish at 6:30 p.m. and the 24-hour racers finish at 6:30 a.m. on Sunday. There is always a good turnout of recumbent racers on all platforms. Recumbents have a separate category but are normally welcomed by our upright brethren. I've raced it several times and have been a spectator a number of times. I get to reconnect with old friends and meet new ones. There are day of race entries available, but be warned, the races start at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Maybe I'll see you there. Finally, if you're thinking about doing some racing and you are 50 and older, check out your local senior games. In the past couple of years, more state and local senior games are allowing recumbent bikes and trikes to participate. These are short time trial type races, but they are challenging and a good way to test your fitness against others in your age group. This year, the national games are being held in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and recumbents are allowed to participate. Normally, one would have to qualify, but this year, you can enter without winning a state qualifier. This will probably not happen again. Registration is open until March 1st. That's it for this month. Stay on the bike and keep moving forward. Back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Denny. We are going to move right on into the sponsors. You're probably wondering who helps us put this show on every month financially and supporting us by the industry that makes this all possible. I'm not sure what that means. Anyways, here's our sponsors. First of all, TerraCycle. From fairings to headrests, whatever accessory you need, Pat and crew have you covered. And Trailside Trikes. If you find yourself in Florida, near the Withlacoochee Trail, or in Knoxville, Tennessee, check out Andrew's shop and his amazing crew. And TerraTrike and Greenspeed trikes. Your vision, whatever it is, TerraTrike has a trike to take you there. And Greenspeed cutting-edge designs create performance through Aussie ingenuity. And Laidback Cycles, the top USA dealer for TerraTrike and the premier source for CatTrike, Ice, and Greenspeed. We give you the freedom to ride. And Connecticut Yankee Peddler. We feature multiple brands of trikes, including electric assist models. Test rides and Southern Iowa hospitality are always available at our mega store in Sheraton. And Avenue Trikes, with the gearing you need and the comfort you want, in stock and ready to ship so you can enjoy riding again. Dealer inquiries are welcome. And AZUB. For 2022, we wish the whole recumbent community many unique experiences riding recumbent two-wheelers, trikes, quads, and velomobiles. And Recumbent PDX, CatTrike's West Coast Megastore. Schedule your test ride on trikes with pedal assist electric from both Bosch and Bafang, roll-off and schlumpf, component groups, and adaptive builds. Experience the joy of CatTrike. All right, guys, we don't have any viewer submissions today, but if you'd like to submit something, an event or pictures that you have for a particularly interesting ride or tour, send them to us, laidbackbikereport@gmail.com. All right, guys, the next show is going to be March 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, our regular time. We will announce the subjects of that show shortly. Now, how can you support the Laidback Bike Report? Please like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I have to get up above that. There we go. And click on that little white eye right up there. And if you do that, it'll take you right to our laidbackbikereport.com website. You'll find lots more information there. And also, please, if you can, become a Patreon. Go to patreon.com and look for Laidback Bike Report, or look in the description below where we'll have the link there. You can do a Patreon support for only $1 a month or more if you like. So thanks. We love our Patreons. We appreciate them. All right, Trey, bring everybody on up here if you would. Let's have a look and see who is here to say goodbye to and thanks to. All of our wonderful panelists and Mark Harris there with that wonderful report. BJ has left us, I believe. We thank you guys all so very much. And Doug, we really appreciate that great news about Roll. We'll be keeping our eyes on that as well. So, guys, thank you so much for participating so well. We really enjoyed having you on the show today. So I appreciate those guys, and I really appreciate all of you guys here for watching every month and supporting us as you do. So until our next webcast, from all of us here at the Laidback Bike Report, so long, Bent Riders.